All right, so get ready for this, okay? Because today we're diving deep into the world of global education with IEG Campus, that corporate brief you sent over.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, this is not your typical boring read.
No, absolutely not. It's anything but typical, right? Transforming lives, enriching communities. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement to make, even for a mission statement.
Yeah, no kidding. It definitely grabbed my attention. I have to admit, I was hooked. But the question is, how does IEG Campus actually live up to those big goals? What are they doing to make a real difference?
Well, one of the first things that struck me was just their incredible scope. I mean, we're talking everything here, from K-12 programs to, vocational training, TVET for those who know, all the way to postgraduate degrees and even executive education.
Wow, so they're not messing around. It's like they're saying, look, no matter where you are in your learning journey, we've got you covered.
Exactly. And it's not just about, the traditional student age groups or career stages. They're really emphasizing this idea of lifelong learning and adapting to, well, let's be honest, a world where we're all constantly trying to keep up with the latest skills, right?
Oh, tell me about it. It's a never-ending race to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
But you know what I found really fascinating? Their global reach. This isn't just some local or even national thing. The brief highlights partnerships on literally every continent, from universities in Asia and Africa to huge tech companies in North America and Europe.
It's a very deliberate strategy, for sure. They're not just offering these standalone programs, right? They're creating this interconnected network of education all across the globe, and that's pretty impressive.
Okay, so let's unpack this network idea a bit. What's your take on all these partnerships they keep mentioning? We see universities, obviously, but also companies like HCL Tech, which is a big deal in the IT world, and even organizations like TU Rhineland, which I have to admit I had to Google.
Right. Well, what I find fascinating here is that IEG isn't just laser focused on academic theory, These partnerships tell me they're all about connecting education to actual real-world skills and making sure people are employable, which is something I know you've been thinking a lot about lately. Am I right?
You're absolutely reading my mind. And speaking of real-world skills, the brief keeps highlighting their digital learning solutions. Online programs, blended learning, all of that. It's like they're trying to future-proof education for this digital age that we're living in.
Without a doubt. They're not shying away from it at all. They actually call themselves a world-class digital learning hub and a digital learning and talent hub. Now, those could just be buzzwords, but I get the sense that they're walking the walk here, wouldn't you say?
Okay, so they're digitally driven, globally connected, and all about those partnerships. But let's get down to brass tacks. What does that actually look like for, say, an actual student enrolled in one of their programs?
Okay, so let's dive into a concrete example. One that jumped out at me was their partnership with University Tun Abdul Razak, or Unai Razak for short. They've teamed up to offer an MBA in design thinking and innovation.
Okay, now we're talking. Design thinking is so hot right now. It's all about finding those creative solutions to those really complex problems that we're facing.
And the fact that IEG is involved in a program like this tells me that they're deeply in tune with what's happening in the industry, They want to make sure their students have the skills that are in demand right now, not like skills that were relevant a decade ago. They're thinking ahead.
Exactly. It's not just about getting any old degree anymore. It's about getting the right degree, the one that's actually going to open doors in this crazy competitive job market.
And not just any job market, right? We're talking about a global job market. I mean, you've got this MBA program that's a collaboration between a Malaysian university and an organization with partners all over the world. They're opening up these opportunities for students to think beyond their own backyard, to see themselves as part of a global network of professionals.
I love that. It's not just about IEG success. It's about the impact they're having on students and institutions worldwide. It's a ripple effect.
Exactly. And speaking of impact, IEG's brief does something pretty clever. They highlight what they call success stories. We see actual real-world examples of their approach, and let me tell you, some of them are pretty remarkable.
Well, I love a good success story. Let's dig into a few, because I'm really curious to see how this all translates into tangible results. What have they actually accomplished?
Okay, so one that really caught my eye was their aged care program. They're training students in Australia, a country known for its high standards in aged care. And then get this, helping them find jobs in Germany and Japan.
Wow, talk about a global need. We hear so much about aging populations and not enough skilled caregivers to meet the demand. This is huge.
Right. And it's a win-win for everyone, really. Students get this top-notch training and incredible opportunities to work abroad, while these countries that are facing labor shortages, they get these highly skilled professionals. It's like global problem solving in action.
I love it. Okay, this next one is right up your alley, I think, especially given your interest in addressing those skills gaps. IEG's collaboration with HCL Tech on something they call the Tech B program.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of how they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk. TechBee is designed for recent high school graduates, and it gives them the specific skills they need to land entry-level tech jobs. It's incredible.
It's like a fast track into one of the hottest, most in-demand industries out there. No more like want to run in the dark after graduation trying to figure out what to do.
Exactly, and it's not like they're just teaching general coding skills or something. They've aligned their entire curriculum with HCL Tech's own skill mesh and job competency framework. It's very strategic.
Hold on, I need to hear more about this skill mesh and job competency framework. What are those exactly?
So basically, HCL Tech took a deep dive into the specific skills and competencies that their workforce actually needs. We're talking like the nitty-gritty details of what makes someone successful in their company. And then they integrated all of that into the Tech B program. So IEG is making sure that their graduates are job ready from day one. It's a brilliant example of how education can be tailored to meet the exact needs of the job market.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like cutting out all the fluff and making education directly relevant to what employers are looking for. Okay, this is all incredibly impressive, but I don't want us to get so caught up in these individual stories that we miss the forest for the trees. What does it all mean in the bigger picture?
Now, that's the million-dollar question, right? And it's definitely one we need to unpack. But before we do that, something else about this corporate brief struck me, and I think it's important.
Ooh, I love where this is going.
Yeah.
What else jumped out at you?
Well, it dawned on me that this brief feels different. It's almost like it's geared towards other organizations, not directly to students like a typical university brochure would be. Have you noticed that?
You know, you're right. I hadn't even thought about that, but it makes perfect sense when you put it that way.
Exactly. It tells me that IEG is very strategically positioning themselves as the bridge, the facilitator, the connector in this whole global education network. They're not just saying, hey, come learn with us. They're saying, let's partner up and build the future of education together. And that's a really powerful message.
Okay, now it's all starting to click into place.
Right.
They're not just a school. They're more like an education, what's the word? Consultant, matchmaker. What would you call it?
I think it might be a blend of both. They have their own programs, but they're also creating this ecosystem where other institutions and companies can plug in and collaborate. They're bringing everyone together.
And that's where their true innovation lies, wouldn't you say? It's not just about what they're teaching. It's about how they're changing the whole game.
Absolutely. They're not just trying to compete within the system as it is. They're reshaping the entire system. They understand that the future of education is all about breaking down these walls, building bridges, and creating a more interconnected and dynamic education landscape. And that's exciting.
This is all so fascinating, but I think we've given our listeners a lot to digest already, even just in this first part of our deep dive. Let's take a moment to let all of this sink in. And then we'll come back and really unpack the broader implications of what IEG is doing and what it means to the future of education and, more importantly, what it could mean for you. You know, as we were talking about IEG's role as this connector in the whole education landscape, it made me wonder, are they trying to, cover every single industry out there? We've talked about aged care, tech training. They even mentioned a smart farming specialist program in the brief. What is going on?
It's true. They do seem to have their hands in a lot of different cookie jars. But I don't think it's about just being everywhere at once, you know. It's more about, I think, trying to identify those areas where there's a real growing demand, you know, sectors where maybe some traditional education just hasn't quite caught up yet.
So instead of just churning out graduates with these generic degrees, they're being much more strategic and saying, okay, where are the actual needs in the global workforce?
Yeah.
And how can we create programs that actually address those needs directly?
Exactly. It's a much more agile and responsive approach. It's kind of like how, you know, businesses have to adapt constantly to stay competitive, right? Especially in this rapidly changing market we're in. And it's not just about the what, the specific industries. It's also about the how. Remember that program we were talking about, the one for training teachers in digital literacy and cybersecurity?
Oh, yeah. That one really stuck with me, for sure. It's so easy to just assume that, you know, teachers being surrounded by technology all day are automatically tech wizards.
Yeah.
But the reality is they need specialized training too, right? I mean, the digital world is constantly changing. It's overwhelming even for me.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it speaks volumes that IEG, in partnership with Yayasan Peneraju, is actually stepping up and providing that training. It shows that they're really committed to supporting educators just as much as students because they recognize that both are essential in this whole lifelong learning thing.
It always circles back to that interconnectedness we were talking about, doesn't it? They're thinking about the whole picture, not just these isolated pieces of the puzzle.
And they're not just like throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks. They've got the results to back it up. The brief actually mentions some really impressive KPIs, key performance indicators, from that Yayasan Peneraju program. We're talking close to 100% success rates in some cases, which is amazing.
Okay, now those are some numbers I can get behind. But for someone like me, who learns best by actually doing things, hands-on, I'm really curious about what these programs actually look like in action. The brief mentions, like, digital STEM train the trainer and cybersecurity for teachers. But I need visuals. Paint me a picture. What's it actually like to be a part of that?
Okay, so imagine this. You're a teacher, right? And you're in a classroom. But instead of just textbooks and whiteboards, you're surrounded by all this cutting-edge technology. You're learning how to code, how to protect yourself and your students from cyber attacks, how to actually use digital tools in your lessons to make them more engaging and effective for your students. It's not just theory, it's very practical.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. That sounds so much more exciting than those dry, boring teacher training sessions I remember from back in the day.
Right. It's a completely different world. And it's not just about, like, showing them the technology and saying good luck. It's about empowering these educators to feel confident and competent in using these tools in the digital age. And let's not forget about their work with IABC. That's the International Association of Business Analytics Certification. They're offering a whole bunch of certifications in data science, AI, business analytics, all of that. It ties into this digital literacy thing really well.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying they're trying to turn all teachers into data scientists now? Because that's a whole other level.
Not necessarily. But you have to admit, in a world that's increasingly driven by data, these skills are becoming valuable everywhere, even in fields you might not typically associate with data science. Think about it. Teachers are already analyzing data all the time, right? Tracking student progress, figuring out what's working and what's not, identifying areas for improvement. These certifications just give them a more robust toolkit to do that more effectively. It's like leveling up their skills no matter what subject they teach.
So it's not about just teaching isolated tech skills. It's about giving people the tools they need to thrive in this data-driven world, whatever their job might be.
Yeah.
That's a really powerful message.
Right. It's about empowerment. And what's cool is that these certifications are recognized globally. So it goes back to that idea of a borderless education. You're not just getting certified for a specific job in a specific place. You're getting credentials that can travel with you, opening up possibilities all over the world.
Okay, I'm really starting to see the bigger picture here. This isn't just about programs or industries. It's a total mindset shift. How we approach education and career development has to change. It's a whole new ballgame.
And it's about making education more equitable and accessible, which I know is something you're passionate about.
Oh, absolutely. And to be honest with you, the whole idea of global education can sometimes feel a bit, elitist.
Yeah.
Like it's only for the people who can afford to fly around the world. But the way IEG is incorporating these public-private partnerships, it makes it much more accessible for everyone, don't you think?
I totally agree. By working with governments, NGOs, and private companies, they're finding ways to fund these initiatives and open those doors to so many more students. And the best part, everyone benefits in the end.
It's true. It's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Students get access to these amazing programs and opportunities, companies get a pipeline of qualified candidates, and IEG gets to fulfill its mission. It's like this positive feedback loop of transforming lives and enriching communities. It's a model for real change, not just a Band-Aid solution.
Exactly. It's not about charity. It's about creating a system where everyone has a genuine shot at succeeding and contributing, regardless of their background or how much money they have. And that's something I think we can all get behind.
Now, that's a future I'm excited about. But I'm curious. We spent a lot of time talking about how IEG is doing all of this, but what does it actually mean in the grand scheme of things? Where does it all lead? What's the takeaway for our listeners?
You're asking the really big questions now. And those are the best ones to ask. And to be honest with you, that's something we should definitely unpack. But before we get too deep into it, let's take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors. We'll be right back, so don't go anywhere.
Okay. We're back and ready to, really tie all these threads together. We've talked about IEG's big mission, the really cool programs and partnerships. But now let's cut to the chase. What's the takeaway for our listeners? What does all of this tell us about where education is heading in the future?
For me, it really comes down to this IEG's model isn't just some one-off thing or an exception to the rule. It actually reflects a much bigger shift that's happening in how we think about education altogether.
Okay.
A shift you're probably already starting to see in your own life, right? In your career too. It's not enough anymore to just get that degree and say, okay, I'm done learning. The world's changing way too fast for that, and we have to be ready to adapt constantly.
Totally. It's like we were saying earlier, businesses need to be adaptable and quick on their feet. The same goes for each of us as individuals. We can't just rest on our laurels. We have to keep learning, upskilling, reskilling. It's a constant evolution. But how do we even keep up with all that? It's a lot.
That's where things get really, really interesting. Because education isn't limited to that traditional classroom setting anymore. Not at all. It's happening online. It's happening through these partnerships between universities and companies, across borders even. Those lines are getting blurrier and blurrier every day, which is creating a much more dynamic and open landscape. Anyone can join in.
Okay, that all sounds amazing in theory, but if I'm being honest, it also feels a little overwhelming,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not about to enroll in another degree program right this second,
Yeah.
but I also don't want to be left behind in the dust.
Hmm.
So what's someone like me supposed to do? Give me some advice.
That's the beauty of this whole thing. You don't necessarily need another degree to stay relevant. Not at all. There are so many different paths you can take now. You've got online courses, specialized certifications, workshops, conferences. You name it, it exists. It's all about figuring out what you're interested in, what your goals are, and then creating your own personalized learning adventure.
So it's less about following a predetermined route and more about, like, blazing your own trail, being the architect of your own education. I like the sound of that.
Exactly. And I get it, it can seem daunting at first, but it's also incredibly empowering. Think about it. What skills have you always wanted to learn? What are you curious about? What knowledge gaps are holding you back? Once you figure those things out, you can start exploring all these incredible opportunities that are out there just waiting for you.
You're so right. It's about shifting from just being a passive consumer of information to actually taking control and shaping our own educational journeys.
I love
I love that.
Yes. And what excites me about IEG's whole approach is that they're creating a framework for this new way of learning. They're connecting the dots between us as individuals, institutions, and entire industries all across the globe. They're not just giving us answers, they're helping us make those connections and giving us the power to take charge of our own learning, which is huge.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive, I have to say.
Yeah.
We've learned so much about IEG Campus, but more importantly, we've gotten this incredible glimpse into the future of education, and that's really exciting. So as we wrap things up here, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners will remember from today? If they only remember one thing, what should it be?
If there's one thing I really want to stick with you after listening to this, it's this. The future of education is here right now. It's all about embracing that idea of lifelong learning, being adaptable, being open to new things, and carving out your own unique path. The possibilities are limitless.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this incredible adventure into the world of global education. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those brains buzzing.